Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. It started with silence, the wrong kind, the kind that crawls under your skin. I moved to the woods for peace, but what I found was a neighborhood running a surveillance state disguised as an HOA. Cameras, bugs, threats. They watched the wrong guy, and I watched back. It all started with silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that made your skin prickle, like someone had just stopped talking about you the moment you walked into a room. I'd moved into my house just over 7 months ago, high up in the tree-thick hills of Northern California, far enough from the city that I could breathe, but not so far that I couldn't order spare server parts with next-day delivery. It was mine, bought outright, no loans, no liens, no HOAs. That last part was important. See, just down the hill sits Pine Brook Heights, a neighborhood of manicured misery and Stepford smiles. The kind of place where lawn height is regulated more strictly than gun ownership. I'd scoped it out before buying, confirmed twice that I was outside their jurisdiction, far enough away that I didn't need to play pretend about mailbox design or Christmas light duration, just close enough to be a tempting nuisance. The first few weeks were uneventful. Some curious stares from the neighbors in pressed polos and pastel visors. I waved. They didn't. That was fine. I didn't move here to host potlucks. The first real contact came in the form of a knock on my front gate, an actual human, clipboard in hand. His name was Jason, though the way he introduced himself as representing the Community Coordination Committee made me instantly regret answering. He was cheery in the way all trained pests are. Told me there was a wine tasting event hosted by the HOA and asked if they could borrow my front patch for overflow parking. I told him the patch he was talking about was called a yard, and no, it was not available for lease, temporary or otherwise. A week later, the trees on the edge of my property, redwoods that had stood longer than any HOA in the state, suddenly became a safety concern. Karen Donovan herself made the pilgrimage up my drive to deliver that message. She wore the HOA president badge like it was forged from real authority. Said she had arborists who could trim the overhanging branches as a courtesy. I asked if that courtesy came with a chainsaw and a waiver of liability. She didn't answer. I didn't let them onto the land. Her smile didn't quite fade, but I saw it crack. From there, it got weird. People I didn't recognize began walking past my house, slowly. Always alone, always around the same time. Some carried dog leashes with no dog. One jogger ran in place in front of my driveway for a full minute. My motion cameras lit up like Christmas. Then the Wi-Fi started dipping, not in a natural mountain network hiccup kind of way. This was patterned, intermittent signal spikes, interference. My router log showed connection attempts I didn't initiate. I set up packet monitoring and caught multiple pings from a strange repeater node nearby. MAC address spoofed. Cute. I started suspecting more when the mail stopped arriving. 3 times in 1 month, USPS couldn't deliver due to obstruction. There was no obstruction. There was, however, a new white Range Rover parked across from my drive each time, idling with someone in it who looked like they flunked out of private security school. But the real kicker? Karen. During a meeting at a local co-op I sometimes volunteered at, she struck up a conversation like we were old friends. Casual chat. Nothing strange. But halfway through, she mentioned something about my new UV sterilizer in the kitchen and how those energy-saving induction cooktops heat fast but cool slow. I hadn't told anyone about that. Hell, the cooktop had arrived 2 days earlier. I installed it myself and mentioned it once, muttering to myself during a call with my buddy Connor on speakerphone in my living room. That's when the pattern clicked. This wasn't a coincidence. This was surveillance. And not the busybody binoculars type. This was targeted, technical, deliberate. I didn't panic. That's not who I am. You don't spend 10 years in cybersecurity and 5 of them under contract with the NSA and forget how to stay calm under pressure. I pulled out my old sweep gear, a few handheld spectrum analyzers, a field frequency detector, a signal sniffer I'd built out of a Pine 64 board, and stubbornness. I spent 2 nights sweeping the house, room by room, socket by socket. Behind vents, inside lamps, under the deck, I found dust, mice droppings, and a whole lot of nothing until I reached the CO2 detector in the upstairs hallway. It was fake. The housing was right. Weight and labeling close enough. But the board inside wasn't a sensor. It was a compact LTE transmission module, low-powered, fitted with a small rechargeable battery. No smoke detection, no CO2 readings. Just a stream of upstream traffic in narrow frequency bands pinging off the nearest cell tower every 15 seconds. I found 2 more devices like it, one in the hallway light fixture wired into my ceiling's electrical, another inside a bookend on my shelf that I don't remember owning. Then a 4th, mounted under the back porch, waterproofed with lazy epoxy. Same model, all of them transmitting. The pièce de résistance, a device behind my router, small, clean, custom. It was sniffing all my outgoing packets and rerouting them through a spoofed DNS pathway, pinging off what it labeled as PBH-net. Pine Brook Heights. HOA had a shadow network. I stared at it for a long time. Then I did what anyone with a healthy paranoia and a past in covert networks would do. I filmed everything. I shot footage of the teardown, narrated every step, showed the MAC addresses, the serials, the time logs. I uploaded it to multiple encrypted drives, sent one to Connor, another to a lawyer I'd used in D.C. for privacy consulting. I called the sheriff's office. Then I called a contact in CISA. And I waited, not to catch them, to see what they'd do next. They didn't waste time. Less than 24 hours after I reported the surveillance devices and forwarded my findings to both CISA and the county sheriff's office, a matte black SUV with no license plates pulled up in front of my gate. It idled there for a while, just past the edge of my motion sensor range, as if whoever was inside knew the exact perimeter of my surveillance net. That wasn't paranoia. That was precision. I watched from my upstairs office window, camera rolling, coffee in hand. When they finally stepped out, 2 men emerged, both built like refrigerators, in matching black tactical pants, boots, and polo shirts with no insignia, no badges, no name tags. One had a wire in his ear, the other had something bulging under his jacket, and I was willing to bet it wasn't a pocket Bible. They walked up my driveway slowly, like they were waiting to be noticed. So I let them. I opened the front door before they could knock. Phone in my shirt pocket, already live streaming to a secure cloud account. "You Milo Trainer?" the first one asked. He didn't smile. "I am." "You boys from Amazon Delivery?" "You found something," he said flatly. "Something you weren't supposed to." I gave him a polite smile. "You'll have to be more specific." "I find a lot of things, usually on my own property." "Look," the other one chimed in, stepping closer. "We're here as a courtesy. People like you, guys who poke around where they shouldn't, you make life harder for everyone. Let it go." "People like me, huh?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean law-abiding property owners?" The first guy took a step forward. "You think this is a game? You don't walk away. You'll end up in a report nobody sees. You want that?" I didn't flinch. Instead, I turned my gaze past them, just over their shoulders. They followed my eyes. 200 yards up the road, a brown and gold SUV rolled into view from the woods. Sheriff's Department livery, slow and deliberate. Right behind it, a white Ford Explorer with federal tags, roof light embedded clean into the body. And that one was CISA. The goons froze. My doorbell camera caught the moment perfectly, shoulders tightening, hands twitching just slightly. They hadn't expected that. "You brought backup?" one of them asked, trying to hide the shake in his voice. "No," I said. "They invited themselves. I just made sure the coffee was hot." The sheriff's deputy, a guy named Carlson I'd dealt with a couple times before, stepped out with that trademark rural calm and an unmistakable swagger of someone walking into a situation already resolved. "Morning, gentlemen," he said cheerfully. "Got a report of a disturbance. You two must be the disturbance." Neither thug answered. The CISA agent, a clean-cut woman in her late 30s with the clipped cadence of someone who reads internal threat reports for breakfast, came up behind Carlson. She held out her badge and identified herself before pulling a slim folder from her messenger bag. "We've been tracking LTE beacon traffic linked to unauthorized data collection in this region," she said, voice cold and clean. "These 2 men are of interest in an ongoing federal investigation. Agent Kwan," she added, nodding at me. "Thanks for the tip." Kwan, not my real name, obviously. Just one I'd used once when pinging their intake system under an alias. Still, professional touch. Carlson raised an eyebrow at me. I gave him a small shrug. "I like my privacy," I said. From there, things moved quickly. The 2 men were handcuffed without protest. Turns out they had false IDs and unregistered firearms in the vehicle, one of which had been modified for suppression. Nice. The SUV was impounded. The deputy took statements. The CISA agent asked me a few questions, but she already had everything she needed. The devices, the footage, the logs. I'd done their job for them. They just had to tie it to the right people, and they would. Because now it wasn't just about a nosy HOA. It was a coordinated intimidation effort with technical infrastructure, hired muscle, and a cover-up. After they left, I stood alone in my front yard, listening to the wind whistle through the trees like it always did before I bought the place. Same sound, different air. Now there was tension in the soil, like the land itself knew something had shifted. I checked the camera feeds again. My stream was intact, already mirrored to 3 encrypted nodes. The footage of the arrest had been captured from 6 angles. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was documenting a story that no one was supposed to see. That afternoon, I got a message from Connor. "Holy hell," it said. "You just made 2 people disappear on live stream. You okay?" I replied with a photo, me in front of the CISA SUV. Thumbs up captioned, "Tuesday." He responded with a meme. Something about digital cowboys. I laughed. The truth was, I wasn't okay. Not entirely. This had gone from strange to dangerous. This wasn't HOA-level madness anymore. This was organized surveillance, government-level signal engineering, and intimidation tactics straight out of an agency playbook. And if Karen Donovan had a hand in this, and I was almost sure she did, then this was just the beginning. I hadn't beaten them. Not yet. I'd just let them know I was awake. By the end of that week, I started noticing something interesting. Silence. But not the same heavy kind that first settled around me when this all began. This silence had shape. It had intent. The black SUVs stopped showing up. No more phony joggers. No more mysterious dropouts on my Wi-Fi. My smart lights didn't flicker at 3 a.m. anymore, and the rotor logs were so clean they looked pre-washed. It was too perfect. I've seen this before. After a failed operation, those responsible go underground, delete traces, cut ties, change tactics. The worst mistake someone in my line of work, or former line of work, can make is assuming the storm's passed just because the thunder stopped. So I doubled down. I reached out to a few former colleagues from my NSA contracting days. Not spooks, field engineers, quiet guys. The type who can pull metadata from electromagnetic pulse residue like it's a Sudoku puzzle. I didn't tell them everything, just enough. Sent them the data dumps, a layout of the devices I found, and the weird MITM module I'd pulled from my router wall. 2 of them called me within the hour. One of them used the phrase military-adjacent firmware. That's when I knew I wasn't just being watched. I was part of something much bigger. A few days later, just when things were looking boring again, I heard tires on gravel at 6:42 a.m. I peered through my upstairs window. It was a crew. 2 trucks, both with local contractor plates, logos slapped on the doors. North Branch Forestry Solutions. I'd never heard of them. The trucks were pulling up to the same tree line where Karen's people had once asked to trim dangerous limbs. Except this time, nobody asked. I walked down the drive calmly, sidearm holstered beneath my flannel just in case things went sideways. By the time I reached them, 2 men were already unloading gear, chainsaws, helmets, measuring tape, and stepping across my property line. "Hey," I called out. "What are you doing?" The guy closest to me was mid-40s, sun-scorched skin, high-vis vest. "Tree maintenance," he said like I'd asked him the weather. "By whose order?" "HOA directive," he said. "We got an approved work order here." I didn't laugh. I wanted to, but instead, I pulled out my phone and started recording. "You're on private property. I'm not a member of the HOA. There is no easement. That tree line belongs to me. Step back immediately." He paused, blinked at me like he'd heard that before, then reached into the truck and handed me a piece of paper. It was a forged letterhead. Pine Brook Heights HOA. Signature at the bottom. Karen Donovan. With what I assume was supposed to be legalese demanding emergency foliage mitigation. Emergency foliage mitigation. Beautiful. While we were talking, another guy had already started his saw. I shouted at him to kill it. He hesitated until I held up my badge from the sheriff's office. Not a cop badge, of course. Just the incident report card they'd given me after the last arrest. Laminated and very official looking. I'd learned a long time ago that paper makes people freeze faster than bullets. They backed off, And then I called Carlson again. He showed up within 20 minutes. The work crew was still there, awkwardly leaning on their trucks, trying to pretend they were checking oil levels. Carlson took the fake HOA order, held it up to the sun, and let out a long, annoyed breath. "You're not letting this go, huh?" he muttered, mostly to himself. "Not me," I said. "Them." He made a few calls. Turns out North Branch Forestry had a business license filed only 2 months ago. Their office was listed in a strip mall that hadn't been operational in over a year. Their phone number redirected to a voicemail that just said, "Leave a message after the tone." Fake company, real equipment. Paid muscle again, just dressed up this time. Carlson detained the crew for trespassing and referred the documents to the county prosecutor. They weren't arrested, but they were rattled. One of them asked me, quietly when Carlson wasn't looking, "Man, what is this neighborhood?" I didn't answer, because I was wondering the same thing. Later that afternoon, I took a drive down into Pine Brook Heights. Nothing fancy. Just a stroll in my unassuming Tacoma with the windows down, music low, no phone signals broadcasting. I wasn't there to provoke, just to look. Karen's house stood at the top of the loop. It was larger than the others. Brick facade, triple-tiered hedges trimmed with military precision. There was a discreet community management sign outside the garage and a dark green mailbox with a golden plaque that read, "Donovan." Out front, I saw a teenage boy and girl, maybe high school age, washing a silver SUV. Not Karen, not HOA, just kids. And something in that image made my jaw tighten, because someone in that house, not those kids, had paid professionals to trespass on my property with chainsaws and fake documents. Someone who'd already sent men in black to warn me. That night, I began building a local network map. I started scraping Pine Brook Heights' publicly accessible IoT footprints, streetlight relays, smart sprinklers, shared security node overlaps. I wasn't hacking, yet, just observing, passive scanning. What I found was strange. An unusually high number of mirrored signal loops, IoT pings that bounced off routers and returned empty. That only happens in one of two cases: when you're dealing with advanced home automation, or someone's built a closed system for internal traffic monitoring. They had their own network. Pine Brook Heights wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a sandbox. And someone in it was playing God. The following morning, a plain manila envelope appeared on my doorstep. No postage, no return address. Just my name written in black marker, Milo, all caps, like someone yelling it through handwriting. I didn't open it inside. Old habits. Instead, I pulled on gloves, grabbed a UV lamp, and took it out to the shed where I kept the portable fume hood. Inside were a handful of printed photos, time-stamped. All of me. One at the mailbox, one raking leaves in the backyard, one in my kitchen window, brushing my teeth. My heart didn't skip. It compressed. The timestamps ran over 6 weeks. A small folded note accompanied the stack. "This isn't personal. It's about the health of the community. Your actions are dangerous." No signature, no contact, just a threat dressed as a sermon. I scanned the photos. The angles were telling. 2 of the shots were taken from elevation, drones, others through long lens glass, possibly the neighbor's house across the tree line. The kitchen shot? That one was close. Too close. I began checking for new devices again. I knew the last sweep hadn't found everything. By noon, I had isolated one more transmitter, this one embedded into a replacement bulb I hadn't ordered in the hallway light I almost never turned on. The bulb's internal housing was modified to contain a pinhole camera and LTE module. It had been online for 48 days. I didn't bother getting angry. I went clinical, documented it, photographed, cataloged, logged traffic timestamps. All of it fed into the archive I was building. Every new piece added another nail in the coffin of plausible deniability. Then came the knock on the door. I checked the cam. Another delivery? Number worse. It was Karen. She stood there like she owned the air around her. Cream-colored suit jacket, pearls, clutch folder held like a Bible, and that damn practiced suburban smile. I opened the door halfway. "Karen," I said. "Something I can help you with." She tried to peek inside. I didn't move. She gave up the angle quickly and shifted into her pitch. "Mr. Trainer," she began, as if this was a town hall, "there have been some concerns from the community about your behavior." My eyebrow twitched. "Behavior?" "You've been observed exhibiting hostile actions," she continued, flipping through her folder. Filming workers, interrogating residents, and installing what appeared to be surveillance devices. I almost laughed. You mean the cameras on my own property? She smiled without joy. There's also your refusal to comply with HOA codes. I'm not in your HOA. We have records that indicate otherwise, she said smoothly. I stepped out onto the porch and shut the door behind me. I was one step away from throwing her folder into the azaleas. Karen, you're trespassing, and if you've got records, I suggest you forward them to my attorney. Now, she said, lifting a hand. Let's not escalate. I'm here unofficially. Off the books, if you will. A friendly word. That envelope on my doorstep friendly too. Her eyes didn't flinch, but her lips tightened just enough for me to know she'd expected that question. I don't know what you're referring to. Sure. She took a slow breath, glancing toward the road. I noticed then an unmarked sedan idling under the tree line. Not HOA branded, not government either. A private asset maybe. More pressure. Karen looked back at me and said it. I'll be direct. If you don't cease your current activities, snooping, interfering, collecting information, there will be consequences. Legal ones, I asked. Her smile widened. Let's call them community consequences. And that's when I saw it. She didn't just believe she was right. She believed she was the law, that HOA bylaws overrode the Bill of Rights, that her little kingdom granted her divine suburban mandate. You done? I asked. For now. She turned and walked back down the drive, not bothering to look behind her. I didn't stop her. I didn't need to. Because an hour before she arrived, I had already uploaded the drone photo evidence to CISA's secure intake channel and copied Carlson on the local end. I wasn't just archiving anymore. I was feeding the machine, one bite at a time. That evening, I got a ping from one of the CISA analysts I'd worked with before. He just sent a screenshot, a network graph of Pine Brook Heights, showing over 24 unusual LTE data points clustered around 10 homes. You were right, the message read. This isn't just you. It wasn't. This was systemic, organized, and for the first time, I wasn't the only target. It started unraveling faster than I expected. 3 days after Karen's little porch sermon, a team from CISA arrived unannounced at my property, this time official, this time with backup. 2 SUVs, 1 unmarked sedan, a mobile forensics unit they parked down near the tree line. Agent Harper, the one who'd shown up during the visit from Karen's goons, briefed me in my own living room. She looked tired but alert, like someone living on espresso and adrenaline. This stays between us, she said, sliding a tablet across the table, but you've helped crack open something much bigger than Pine Brook Heights. I scrolled through the data. Node maps, packet analysis, surveillance heat maps built from triangulated LTE pings. The devices I'd found were part of a network, a mesh. More than 30 properties were identified as compromised, not just mine. Residents tagged non-compliant, uncooperative, or off-grid were being actively monitored. Karen, I asked. She's the queen, Harper replied. But she didn't build the castle alone. Turns out the HOA had been running its own IT infrastructure for at least 2 years, using contractor access, private funds, and, most disturbingly, county-level credentials to create a database of residents' metadata. That included heat maps of movement around certain homes, logs of Wi-Fi traffic patterns, automated alerts for keyword flags like lawsuit, violation, or even gun. They were building behavioral profiles, Harper said, tapping one folder. Predictive analytics targeting potential risks to community stability. In other words, anyone who didn't kiss the ring. It was worse than I imagined. One of the tech leads on the case, a guy named Thomas with a knack for mapping closed-loop systems, showed me a full dump from the HOA's internal node. Hidden within it, audio recordings from inside homes. Not just mine, several. Including a family with a disabled daughter, a retired vet, a young couple that had objected to a noise ordinance. All of them had been tagged for heightened observation. Where'd they get the tech? I asked. Harper hesitated. There's a name you're going to recognize. She pulled up a personnel file. Scott Grady, HOA treasurer, but more than that, a system administrator at the county's Department of Information Services. He had access to GIS overlays, municipal address records, network coordination points. He'd been pulling IP range assignments and feeding them into HOA servers, cross-referencing them with router signatures in Pine Brook Heights. He wasn't just spying. He was integrating the HOA's private surveillance into public data infrastructure. I sat back and stared out the window. From this angle, I could see the edge of Karen's property. Her immaculate hedges, her double-locked mailbox, the security camera she didn't know I'd already spoofed twice. She was a dictator. But Scott? He was the deep state of suburbia. The CISA team moved fast. That night, they raided the HOA's office, a cozy standalone building next to the community clubhouse, once a real estate sales center. What they found turned an investigation into a crisis. A full server rack, air-conditioned, shielded. Fiber uplinks routed through a nearby utility pole, unauthorized. Inside, backups of every intercepted data stream, call logs, traffic cameras, packet sniffers, even synced notes from internal meetings where board members discussed threat levels and containment strategy. They had their own risk scoring system. Points assigned for things like declined to attend HOA meeting, complained about fees, or refused access to property line. Karen's personal notes were the cherry on top. Milo, unstable, problem former contractor, tech access above baseline. Must neutralize early. Neutralize, that's what I was to them. Not a neighbor, a variable, a disruption to the order. The next day, subpoenas started flying. Harper told me the FBI was joining the case. Jurisdiction shifted. It wasn't just a federal cybercrime probe now, it was wiretapping, illegal surveillance, civil rights violations, multiple counts. The local DA held a press conference, tried to keep it vague, called it a serious overreach by a private organization. But the media smelled blood. Local reporters were already picking up on the details. Unauthorized audio surveillance, tracking citizens, falsifying legal documents. And in the middle of it all, Karen Donovan, the iron-faced president of the HOA, whose own neighbors were now turning on her. Carlson called me the next morning. "You might want to stay close to home," he said. "Why?" Karen just posted bail. Karen's arrest made headlines for exactly 12 hours. Then she was out. Bail was set absurdly low, less than what I'd spent on my home server rig. She walked free with a smug half-smile on her face, flanked by a lawyer who looked like he billed by the sneer. And while the press screamed about digital overreach and privacy violations, the real engine of damage, the buried tech, the data warehouses, the quiet victims, barely made the second paragraph. But I wasn't worried about the news cycle. I was watching the paper trail. That same week, I got a knock on my door, not from Karen, not from Muscle, but from a man in a sheriff's deputy uniform who looked about 2 months from retirement. He handed me a thick envelope. "Summons," he said, clearly uncomfortable. "Civil court." Inside, 3 separate claims. Defamation of character, plaintiff, Karen Donovan, property interference and obstruction of HOA contractors, plaintiff, Pine Brook Heights, HOA, emotional distress caused by ongoing digital harassment, plaintiff, Scott. Grady, it was theater. Legal performance art. A desperate counterattack meant to cloud the water just enough to slow down federal momentum, but it was sloppy. Their claims were vague, the citations laughable. The HOA had no jurisdiction over my property. I hadn't harassed anyone. I'd just recorded their crimes. But the point wasn't to win. The point was to distract, to bury me in paperwork, drain time, and force me onto the defensive. So I did what any paranoid bastard with a point to prove would do. I went louder. I published a redacted version of my findings. I shared the sanitized evidence. No names, no addresses, just technical facts, packet data, device architecture, known vulnerability exploits used by the HOA's infrastructure. I framed it not as a personal vendetta, but a national homeowner security issue, and I tagged every reporter who had ever written about digital privacy or HOA overreach in the last 5 years. Within 48 hours, it exploded. One local blogger called it Snowden, but make it suburban. I'll take it. Victims started coming forward, first anonymously, then publicly, a retired military couple whose Nest camera had been accessed without their knowledge. A schoolteacher who'd been fined 5 times for property violations based on photos taken inside her garage. A single mother who swore she'd been followed for weeks after refusing to sign a community behavior pledge. The narrative flipped. Karen wasn't just a strict HOA president anymore. She was the architect of a panopticon dressed in stucco and fescue. Then came the real break. CISA, working with the FBI, recovered an internal HOA drive that hadn't been scrubbed. Inside it were meeting minutes, real, unredacted, stupidly honest. One entry read, "Continue soft containment of resistant members. Use audio sampling to build case profiles. Grady to manage firewall masking and DNS obfuscation." And this one, "Trainer's presence remains disruptive. Consider legal pressure plus community isolation. Option, leak unrelated complaint." It was enough. The DOJ issued warrants. Karen was arrested again, this time by federal marshals. No bail this round. Grady tried to run. He made it as far as Nevada before a highway patrol unit flagged his plates and pulled him in. The car had a burner laptop, $12,000 in cash, and a USB with access credentials to 3 county-level databases. He went quietly. Smart. The feds locked it down fast. The HOA building was seized, digital assets frozen, internal servers cloned and archived, and for the first time in decades, Pine Brook Heights HOA ceased all operations. Their official website redirected to a federal seizure notice. Their community app? Offline. Even their Facebook page? Gone. But the damage was already done. Over 20 victims filed civil suits. 4 families came forward claiming psychological trauma due to long-term surveillance. 2 had moved away, convinced they were being stalked by ghosts. One woman spent 6 months in therapy because she thought she was developing paranoid schizophrenia until she saw my report. The press went feral. I did interviews, but never in person. My voice appeared in audio form, identity obscured, visuals blurred. I wasn't interested in fame. I was interested in infrastructure and its failure. It wasn't about Karen anymore, or even Grady. It was about power, how easily it can embed itself inside everyday life. Inside HOAs, inside systems people never question because they look so damn normal. By the time the court froze the HOA's financial accounts and transferred administrative oversight to the county, I wasn't celebrating. I was preparing. Because people like Karen don't build systems alone, and systems like this don't die quietly. The courtroom was ice cold. Not metaphorically, physically. Someone must have cranked the AC like they were trying to preserve evidence. I sat quietly near the back, hoodie drawn, baseball cap pulled low, next to a lawyer who'd defended whistleblowers against 3-letter agencies. Not HOA cases, not small claims, real federal weight. Across the aisle, Karen sat stiff-backed, dressed like an elementary school principal trying to look regretful. Beside her, 2 other board members from Pine Brook Heights, and further down, Scott Grady, pale, clammy, eyes flicking toward every movement like he expected a drone to descend from the ceiling. The U.S. attorney laid it all out with surgical precision. 22 confirmed incidents of illegal electronic surveillance, including unauthorized audio recording devices, smart network infiltration, and LTE-enabled environmental bugs hidden inside homes. 15 documented wireless network breaches, several of which compromised municipal infrastructure, meaning Grady's little side gig had crossed into national criminal territory. 7 documented attempts to extort residents using captured audio or metadata, most subtle, some explicit. And 4 psychological trauma cases, 2 involving children, all substantiated by licensed professionals. Every charge was backed by logs, timestamps, photos, depositions, and expert testimony from the federal side. It wasn't just a case. It was a dissection. Karen's defense tried the obvious routes. She didn't know what Grady was doing. She was just the president of the HOA. She was misled by contractors, but the jury heard the minutes. They saw her digital signature on the threat index chart. They watched footage of her standing on my porch, offering veiled threats. They read internal memos where she wrote phrases like containment, optics, and, my personal favorite, disruption liability index, trainer equals high. Grady tried to flip, offered to turn over encryption keys, but by then, the feds already had them. They'd pulled his work laptop from the county office and traced multiple outbound comms to private IPs registered to Pine Brook Heights servers. His plea deal came with 10 years and no keyboard privileges for the next decade. Karen wasn't so lucky. 17 years, no parole, wiretapping, racketeering, cyberstalking, abuse of position, and, somehow, tax fraud, because when the federal hammer falls, it hits everything. The courtroom stayed silent as the sentence was read. Karen blinked. Once, twice, then pursed her lips like she was holding in a lecture. No tears, no outburst. just a long, stony glare aimed directly at me, though I doubt she recognized me with the beard and hat. I didn't blink. Outside, cameras waited, reporters, victims, former HOA members who hadn't known the depths of what they were complicit in. Some were crying. One woman hugged her teenage son and said, "You were right. You weren't imagining it." I didn't speak to the press. Didn't have to. The outcome did all the talking. Within a month, Pine Brook Heights was stripped of its special zoning status. The HOA, as a legal entity, was dissolved by order of the California Attorney General. Its accounts were liquidated. Every remaining asset, servers, office furniture, even the decorative stone signage out front, was sold off. Proceeds were split among victims who filed civil suits. And me, I received $1.2 million in damages. That check sat untouched for a week. Not because I didn't need it, but because I didn't want to spend a dime before I figured out what came next. What I settled on wasn't revenge. It was resilience. I used the money to found Liberty Netwatch, a nonprofit aimed at helping homeowners across the country identify surveillance risks, defend against invasive tech, and fight back when overreach comes wrapped in bureaucracy and bad landscaping. Our first training session filled in under an hour. The second had a wait list. The third was live streamed and downloaded 63,000 times. People were hungry for protection, not from hackers or cartels, from HOAs. The Pine Brook Heights HOA office doesn't exist anymore. Where there was once a stone and glass structure nestled between sycamore trees, there's now a community library, small, sunlit, filled with donated books and repurposed furniture. It smells like paper and cedar wood. The security cameras inside are still active, but this time they're publicly disclosed, voluntarily maintained, and pointed outward, not inward. Mounted above the entrance, on a brass plaque, are 12 simple words. This room used to eavesdrop, now it reads the Constitution. I stood there during the dedication, quiet in the back, hat pulled low. A little boy read a passage from the Bill of Rights, mispronounced surveillance, and giggled when he got it right the second time. His mom, one of the original victims, though she'd never admitted it publicly, smiled through tears. They asked me to speak. I declined. Liberty Netwatch runs out of a modest office across the county line now. It's staffed by volunteers, former techs, civil rights attorneys, and a few victims who wanted to convert their fear into action. We run seminars, build detection kits, and consult with homeowners nationwide. We've helped expose 4 other HOA-level surveillance operations since launching. Some tried to play it off as community safety. Others blamed rogue board members. None survived the exposure. People write to us now from Arizona, Texas, Florida. They send blurry photos of unmarked boxes, strange blinking lights, fake utility workers who show up without ID. They ask, "Am I crazy?" Or, "Is this happening again?" And I tell them the same thing. You're not crazy. You're just awake. Sometimes I drive past Pine Brook Heights. The hedges are overgrown now, lawns a little less perfect. Kids ride bikes without reflective vests. A couple residents have spray painted over their no trespassing signs. A few even wave when I pass. Progress. Karen Donovan is inmate number C, A312794, currently housed at a federal correctional facility. No press interviews allowed. Her former lawyer filed a motion to appeal based on character misrepresentation. It was denied. Scott Grady was relocated under a reduced sentence program. Rumor has it he's not allowed within 500 feet of any municipal server room. Last I heard, he was working at a truck stop in Reno using a flip phone and going by Jim. Good. Carlson, the sheriff who helped at the start, eventually retired. Sent me a postcard from Montana. Said he bought land nowhere near an HOA. I mailed back a single sentence. Smart man. As for me, I still live in the same place. Still walk that ridge at sunset. Still drink my coffee on the porch with a side of packet monitoring. My router blinks normally now. My mail arrives on time. No more SUVs in the tree line. No more envelopes on the doorstep, but I never stop scanning. Freedom isn't the absence of control. It's knowing when you're being controlled and doing something about it. I used to think paranoia was a liability. Now I call it policy.